Hello there, my name is Loudon Stearns. I'm an associate professor at Berklee College of Music, and I authored and teach 3 different classes on Berklee Online. My 3 classes are Advanced Music Production with Ableton Live, and both composing and producing electronic music classes. And I love electronic music, and I really love gear. So today I've gotten a bunch of Novation equipment, and we're going to look at how it interacts with Ableton Live. I brought a Launchpad S, a launch control, Novation Base Station 2, and hopefully we'll get a chance to play with the Launchpad app on my iPhone there. And we're really looking at how we can interact those with Ableton Live, and they're really designed to work very well with Ableton. And my goal today is to create kind of a performance environment. I'm not really worried about the end musical goal today. I'm trying to create a situation or a space where I can improvise. As I was a Berklee student a long time ago, played bass, and I loved jazz improvisation. It really was my passion and kind of still is. And a lot of my goal with electronic music is to create that kind of feeling, that kind of improvising musical feeling, but with electronics. And I think we're kind of getting to the point with these wonderful controllers. We really can create like a really effective improvisatory musical space. But it does take some work. We have to know a lot of the details of the controllers and also the software to be able to create kind of an environment where we can improvise within. So we'll see right away, if you kind of see my screen and the Launchpad S here, that I have 8 clips in this second track, and I have 2 clips in this first track. And right away, the lights on the Launchpad S are lighting up to kind of reflect what's going on in Ableton. And that's quite easy to set up. Let me show you real quickly how to do that. If you're on a Mac, Command-Com is like an amazing key command. It brings up the preferences in almost every application. And we're going to go to the MIDI sync tab here in the preferences, and what we're really worried about is this top portion of the interface here. And we're looking at the control surface section, and we'll really have set up 2 separate control surfaces. And in Live, the control surface idea is kind of like automatic mappings. It means that the device can have a bunch of modes that automatically interact with the various parameters in Live. And even if you make changes in Live, it puts those changes onto the controller itself. So we have to set up control surfaces for these to work really well. It's pretty straightforward. You choose the control surface that you have in the control surface pull-down menu, and then you also choose the appropriate inputs and outputs. And I set them, as you can see, I set them both up for the Launchpad S and for the launch control, so those are configured there. And that is why we see the lights lighting up to represent kind of what's going on in Live already. Now, to kind of point something out, if you see my screen, I can change the volume of the first track here with this knob. I can change panning right here. And if I switch to these different banks, you'll see we have these different bank buttons here. We get this great details on the bottom of the Live screen. It tells what we're controlling. And if I go to this one, I'm now controlling send levels, right? So we find that because it's a control surface, it really can control a lot of what's going on in Ableton Live. Now, what I have set up here is kind of how clips are by default running in Live. And they're set up so that they launch at the start of the next measure, and they always start at the beginning of the clip, which is good in some circumstances, but again, I'm trying to create a really kind of fun improvisatory environment. So we're going to be really manipulating clip properties so that we can kind of jam out on this device. So let's just experiment with this a little bit. I'm going to bring the volume of this track down a little bit. Oops. Got to switch over to that first bank there, bring the volume of this down a little bit, and then launch my first clip here. And we're going to get a little bit of a groove. And I can change the level right here. I could also change the panning if I wanted. We'll keep that centered. Now, if I click on this second pad here, which is a clip in Live, it's going to wait till the start of the next measure and then move over, right? And it does that because we have our global quantize set to 1 bar, which is this pull-down menu right at the top here. We could set that to something else. If I set that to kind of half, it would move at the next half note. If I set it to 8 bars, it would switch over at the next 8-bar setting. I usually leave the global quantize at 1 bar, and one of the great things is the global quantize can be overridden on a clip-by-clip basis, which we'll be using heavily in the future here. So I've done this to MIDI clips. We can switch between these two grooves. And I also have a set of audio clips in the second track. I have 8 clips here, and I could launch one of those. And again, that's going to wait till the start of the next measure. We'll get this kind of bassy drone going on, which is kind of nice. You'll also hear a little sidechain compression I have set up in there. Now, if I want, I can switch to any one of these other clips, and it's going to wait till the start of the next measure to do that. Now, these are kind of designed, though, to work as really short snippets. They're long clips, but I really only want them for little moments, like kind of hits, right? So let's try some things out. We're going to play with our launch modes on these clips a little bit to see how we can kind of change that action. I'm going to stop everything for a moment. And a lot of what we're going to be doing now is working in the launch box and also the sample box in the bottom of the live interface, or in the detail view of the live interface. So if you're not seeing those, that's because you have these three buttons here, L, the waveform, and the E, and those will show and hide those components. And I'm really making sure I have the L, the launch box, and the sample box open. Now, the first thing we have is our trigger mode, our launch mode, which I have set to trigger, which means that you hit a clip, and hit a pad, and it's going to start that clip. If I hit another one, it'll start another one. Now that's fine for what I want right now, but I kind of want to be able to start these at any moment, kind of really fast, just launch the clips. So this is where I'm going to override that global quantize, and I'm going to set it to none. So I'm going to select all my clips here. I'm going to shift click on them all, so I have all those clips selected, and I'll change my quantization, and again, this is clip level quantization, to none. And now I'm going to just mute my first track here and just try this out. So now we can launch these clips kind of at will, which actually is quite nice. But one thing that's happening, though, is they're all starting right at the beginning of the clip now, which is good in some circumstances, but I'd like to have everything kind of playing on and it just having it switch, from moment to moment, so that the beat can kind of continue on, right? It'd be kind of strange, like particularly with this last track. It always starts at the beginning. I'd like to be able to switch around. And we can see why that's useful. I could kind of stutter. I could play over and over on that one clip. But I like the idea of having it kind of continue on and kind of switching between them. And that's what the Legato mode is for. This is a great feature, and I think is kind of a key part of making this a really playable instrument. So again, I'm going to select all these clips, select the top one, shift-click the last one, and turn on Legato mode. All right? Now I'm going to hit stop here, and I'm going to start again. I'll unmute my clips, and I'll start this top clip. So now we have that playing, and any moment, I can switch, and you can see that it's continuing on the clips, right? So it's like the new clip is picking up where the old one left off. Very cool feature, and that really makes it so I could even have like 10 tracks all warped and lined up and switch between them on the fly and get some really cool kind of quick edits. Now you might have noticed that that actually was a little bit glitchy as I did that. As I hit a pad, there was a little bit of silence before it caught up. And that is because Live is trying to read these clips off of the hard drive. And hard drives aren't as fast as we really need them to be. So when you're working with things like this, kind of a none quantize, and you want things to move really quickly, and you want it to feel like a really playable instrument, you might want to put those clips into RAM. And then you'll find there'll be no lag, and things will really happen right on the beat. And we do that in a similar way. Again, I'm going to select all my clips, and then click on this RAM button over in the sample box. And now let's try the same kind of thing again. I'm going to start this up. Works great, right? So now we're getting a really playable instrument, which I really love. Now I'm noticing for myself that every time I hit one of these, I really only want it to play for about a 16th note, maybe an 8th note, right? I really want it to like play something and then jump back to my drone or maybe to that last kind of groove clip that I have there. So that's when we might want to get into this idea of follow actions. And follow actions are in Live, they say, okay, after a set amount of time, launch a different clip or do something else. And all I want these to do is every time I hit one of these clips, I want it to then play for an 8th note and then jump down to the last clip. Because my last clip is this one, which is a pretty full groove, right? So this is kind of my main song, and I'm going to use the other clips as kind of fills, right? I want that kind of happen automatically, right? I have these moments of silence, or we can kind of move around. So that's what I want to happen kind of automatically. And so again, we're going to go back to the launch box to accomplish that. So I'm going to select every one of my clips, the drone all the way down to the strings here. I'm not going to include that last groove one. And I'm going to go to this follow action area. In the follow action, first we have a bars, beats, and 16th note chooser. And I'm saying after this amount of time, we're going to do some other action. And I'm going to say after 2/16 notes, that's an eighth note, we're going to do something, and what we're going to do is jump to last. Now, when we see these ones that say first or last, it's talking about kind of a clip group. So they're adjacent clips in this one track, right? So now if I try something, I'm going to start this up here. Oh, see that? Just played an eighth note and then jumped down. Automatically jumps back. And now I can just jam out. It's always going to go back to that last clip, and it's always going to stay in time, right? I could even switch grooves, and now it's always going to jump back to that last one. Very cool, right? So we create this kind of automatic performance environment, and it allows me to like maybe play a little bit there, jump to one of my other controllers, come back there. Very cool. So now I think we have this set up just kind of how I want it. Maybe, let's see. I kind of want something different with that first clip. Let's see if this is working the way I want. So if I play this, I kind of want to be able to hang on that drone. Now, one thing I could do is just keep on playing the one pad, so that way it would just keep playing. But it'd be nice if that one would stay. And all I have to do to that is go to the drone clip here and change its follow action to no action, right? So now I can play that one. It's just going to stay there. And I can always play something else, and it's going to go back to my groove, right? So that kind of gives me two different things to play with. I can always kind of quiet things down, get back to a groove, back to a drone, and bring the level of that up. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And our groove is in there, so it's pretty cool. So now I think we have a nice playable instrument here. We have all these follow actions. Now this could be taken much further. Just for an example, what if I was to go to all of these? Oh, I'm sorry, what if I go to my groove clip, right, and put a follow action there? What we could do is say, play another one after an eighth note. Check this out. Now it's going to automatically play this stuff for me. I get this automatic kind of electro house kind of edit possibilities just going on all the time, which is actually pretty sweet. And we see that the lights light up nice too, right? All right, so I'll turn that back to no action because I want to be able to kind of stay on that clip. But this is how I might go about creating kind of a performance environment using the Launchpad S and a carefully crafted live set. Now, all of our mixing can be done with the launch control. We saw me working with volumes, track activators, the mutes there. And there's a variety of different modes. We saw we can work with the sends there as well. And we could actually even manipulate effects with the launch control. Let's check this out. So if I click on this track here, which I call hocket, which is an old term for kind of passing a melody through different players on in an orchestra. And I kind of consider this kind of a hocket. We're kind of jumping between these different clips. Now, what if I was to add some kind of effect here? Like I might want to put an auto filter. Just drop it in the clip. Now, it would be nice to be able to change this over time using the launch control. And there's actually a bunch of really kind of nice kind of secret features, or you kind of have to dig into it a little bit to figure this out. But if I hold factory, we're going to see all these green lights here. And if I click on one of these, we'll actually get different things that we can manipulate. And actually tell us right here, it tells us in the bottom of live what they're working on. But if I hold this down, then click on 3, we're going to see that control surface 2 is now controlling the auto filter. And now I can move this knob to control the filtering on this whole hocket. Let's try it out. Get more resonance. Now as I'm doing this, I might want to mix. I might want to make this track louder. But one of the cool things is I can actually mix the Launchpad also, right? So as I'm doing this, I can switch the Launchpad over to my mixer mode, right? And I could have volume control right here if I like. So we can kind of play with these two devices and kind of mix in either one of them, and I can control a variety of things. We'll go back to the session view here. Back to this, bring my groove up, and we have mute controls. So we know that we can control lots of different things. It's actually pretty amazing how they've packed in so much different control with these two devices. Now the next thing I'd like to introduce to this whole sound, now that I have some stuff going on with my control surfaces, is this synthesizer here. And I really love this synthesizer. Got it a little while ago, and I've been really digging how it works. And one of the great things that they have in Live is the ability to bring in external synths in a really kind of easy way. And it's actually just a device called the external instrument device. Let's check out how this works. But before I look at it in Live, I want to talk about how this is configured. Right now I have the USB cable configured from my base station going into my computer. And that's actually routing MIDI data from the base station 2 into Live. And you can even see if I play keys, we see in the upper right-hand corner of Live a light up to show us that it's receiving MIDI data. And if I want to configure this for my project, I'm going to go to back again to the preferences and make sure in the bottom half that the base station 2 is set up for track right here. And that means that the notes that I play on this can actually play into tracks in Live. So this is not going to be a control surface. It's not going to have automatic mappings to control tracks and effects and that kind of thing, but it's really just going to send notes to a track in Live, like any other sort of keyboard. Once I have that configured, I'm going to create a new track, and in a Mac, I use the Shift Command T key command to create a new track. Click on the track header and Command R to rename it, and we'll just call this Base Station 2. And we need to add a device that will enable us to work with this thing. Now, I didn't mention the other part of the routing. The USB cable is routing MIDI data from the base station into my computer. And I have an audio output from the base station that's routed into my audio interface. And that is just taking the output of the base station audio into my audio interface, where it goes through analog to digital conversion and brought into the computer here. So I want to grab the external instrument device. So this will be in our instruments section of our browser. And I'll grab external instrument and drag it on the base station track that I created here. Now, all the external instrument device is routing. You set up a MIDI to, where this track is going to, where is it going to route its MIDI to, what MIDI device. Then you set an audio from. So where is it going to be receiving audio from? And the idea is, once you've done that, the audio from this device then continues on the chain like any other soft synth. It's actually a really slick feature. So in MIDI 2, I'm going to have to choose the base station. So I say, OK, this track is going to send MIDI to the base station. And then in audio from, we choose the same place that our base station is plugged into. Now, the cool thing is I can now play, and I can see the levels light up. I don't even have to remember where I plugged it in. I see it's channel 2. We grab it there. And now we hear the base station, and it's coming right in a track. I can record MIDI in a track right there and have it play back, and I have it right there. And one of the cool things is now I can even add effects to this. So I might want to add a little bit of a compression to this. So I might grab audio effects and put a compressor after it. And I might want to add a little bit of reverb. So let's grab that. We'll just make those settings. Now I should be using my controller, but that's all right. And just so you can hear it, we'll see we'll have a heavy decay time. So you hear that we're adding now software effects onto our hardware, which is actually really, really slick. And of course, I can use all the controls on the base station, and it just lines up right here within our device. So I think that's pretty slick. I'll just do dry wet a little lower and have that kind of low there. So now the base station is a really nice analog synthesizer. It is an analog synth. And one of the cool things is preset based, so I can go through a variety of presets. We have the patch function here, and I can go through presets. We hear this preset has an arpeggiator built into it, which works great. Now, I want to show you one of the cool things I just discovered today. And I was like, I don't know, I screamed when I figured this out. It was so amazing, right? So the arpeggiator and the step sequencer and the LFOs can all be tempo synced. But how do I get the tempo from my live set into the base station? This is what was so cool. And the thing is, the base station does respond to MIDI clock. So if I go back to those MIDI prefs, and we look at this bottom section here, we have output base station, right? So that's where any MIDI data coming from live can go to the base station. I have this option, this column here for sync. And if I turn that on, now Live is going to send sync settings, or send location and tempo to my base station. So now this would normally change tempo. But if I have this on, this won't change anything. You'll see that the tempo is written there, 70, and of course that lines up directly with what's in my project, right? So so if I turn that, I have no control. Now if I go back to the settings and turn that off, right? Now I change this, I'm changing the tempo that this is going to use for its LFOs and for its arpeggiators and step sequencers and such. But again, I go back to the preferences, I turn on sync output for the bass station. Now I have no control, over my tempo here, because it's always receiving the 70 from there. And now this one, and it's going to stay perfectly in time with my groove, right? So very slick. Now the LFOs can be synced, and the arpeggiators and step sequencer can be synced perfectly. It'll even follow tempo changes. Pretty wild stuff. So I love that. I was really psyched about that because I was just getting into figuring out how to set up the arpeggiators, the step sequencers. Now, I think if you're into synthesis and you've been exploring it for a bit, if you followed me at all, I love synthesis. Most of the controls will be pretty familiar to you, right? You have your big knob, which is your filter here. They did a nice thing. I always love it when designers, they figure out like what are the most important knobs and make them really big. I always kind of like that, and they did that here. And one of the great things about these, which I also noticed the other day, is that this is a very high resolution knob. So most CCs or continuous controllers send a 7-bit signal. Well, this actually uses 2 different CCs, so we can use a much higher resolution, giving you really smooth sweeps. Pretty slick. And some of the other knobs in here also have that kind of high resolution feature, which is wonderful. Well thought out. Now, there are other things in here that you have to use a little bit of menu diving to get to. And I just want to point out how to do that because it's one of the things that kind of confused me a little bit at first. We have all these functions here that can be turned on and off with the actual keyboard. And to get those, like, for instance, I might want to have an LFO key synced, right? To get to one of those, I hold function, and we have an option here for LFO 1 or 2 key sync, and click on it, and we're going to see on or off written there, and we use these patch buttons to change the setting between the 2. And that's going to be the same for almost all these parameters here, and we're going to be using that a bit today, and it's one of these things that I found really, really nice to figure out. Excellent. Now let's see how we would maybe record a little bit of the bass station into live, right? So I'm going to get a better patch here. I always just work in patch 0 myself. Get our oscillator going. Now, one thing to be aware of, and this is something that's going to be the case with any kind of preset-based synthesizer, is when you change your patch, it's very likely that the knobs on the device will no longer represent what's actually happening in the sound. And this is the case for every single synth that has hardware knobs that don't have like motors behind them. As you change patch, very likely might not represent it. So sometimes you might have to find yourself kind of tweaking a knob to get it to be the setting you want. And now I have my nice sound here. Now I'm going to try to record some of this into live and see kind of what happens, right? And one of the cool things is I can actually use my Launchpad to do that. So let's start up. I just want to stop this, and then I'll start a simple groove. And I want to record into a clip, right? Now, the question is, how do I go about doing this? Well, I have my track record enabled, my 3rd track there. Hit this, it's going to wait till the start of the next measure, and now it's recording to that clip. If I hit it again, it'll start playing that back. All right, let's try this again. See what I got in that clip. Now, one of the reasons I did this is we hear that it actually did record the filter automation, right? And if I look in that E window there, we'll see that there is a MIDI control in there for the filter variations that were included, right? So we can record the knob variations that'll all be represented in our MIDI clip. I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to try to use the step sequence that's built into it, into this, which is actually a really nice step sequencer. And it's, again, not quite obvious at first how to use it, but it's really super powerful. So the step we have this section right here on the Novation is our step sequencer and also our arpeggiator. One nice feature that I really like is if you just want to have it hold a button, you can just hit latch. It'll just hold that note forever. Really handy, again, when you just want to tweak knobs or play with your other controllers while that's kind of droning on. You can always hit reset to turn it off, or hit latch to turn it off. Now I want to program in a little bit of a pattern. And this ARP octave sequence button can function in two ways. It can adjust the number of octaves that are being used in the arpeggiator, or you can just choose between 4 different step sequences. And a step sequence is a series of notes that it'll play back based on the pattern or based on the rhythms of your rhythm dial right here. So we record these by turning this dial to the record mode. We'll see it'll say record there, and it's going to record into the first pattern. And I play a series of notes. 4 notes maybe, and then I'll go into play mode. Now I'll play a note. If I turn on my step sequencer, latch, all right, that's pretty cool. So now we can have these patterns kind of play on, and they're going to be in time with our music. You see I even started the music after, and it kind of synced itself up, which is pretty slick. Now let's do a little more complicated pattern, but I'll put this in step sequencer 2. So I'll go to record again, and I'll try maybe a little more complex pattern, use a few more notes, make it a bit longer, and also try to add in some rests. So as I play these patterns, you'll see the numbers go up. So I'll go, and I'll put a rest, see RST, and then I'll do some more. And there's 16 steps. I'll go back to play. Let's try 2. Turn on my pattern. Switch patterns. Pretty slick. Now I'd like to be able to grab those patterns into my live set. And one of the cool things is this does send that information as MIDI data into my project. So if I create a new track, Shift-Command-T, I'll just drag it over the end here. And we'll go to input output, and we'll set the base station as the input. We'll say MIDI from, and I'll choose the base station. If I play this, we even see that it's getting notes, right? Record enable that track as well, right? And now, here we go. Now, so we see in the MIDI clip that I made that those notes are all in there. And it actually even remembered the velocity that I played each one of those notes at when I made the original sequence. If I put this clip now back in my base station track, it can play this pattern. And I'm free to change patches. I like those around 16. That's nice. All right. Now, one of the great things is because this is an analog synth and it only has a couple oscillators, and because it's preset based, we can try some of those same Hockett techniques, but using different patches on this, and it's a really cool function. Let's try this out. So if I take this clip and I duplicate it, say 4 times, right? We notice that each clip actually has a program change option in it. And I really liked right around 16 and 17, and maybe some around there. So I'll go to my first clip, and I'll set that program change to 16. Go to my second one, we'll put the 17. And the other 2, I'll just set kind of random. We'll just see what we get. some really cool patches in here. Let's try this out. So now, that's not crazy enough. I need something really different. Let's go to a different. Yeah. So now we see that clips in our live set can actually change the preset that we have working here. Now, let's try to integrate some of that follow action stuff. So we'll do the same things we did earlier. I'll select all these clips. I'll turn on follow action to say 1/16 note, and we'll just say play next. And we'll also use the legato option here. Let's try it out. Let's move these two tracks. So now it's jumping between presets on this. I can actually still tweak, and it's going to be perfectly in time. If we wanted something a little less consistent, I could maybe change it to 3/16 notes and play any other. So that's pretty slick. So now we have this Hocket kind of idea, playing different presets through here, definitely worth exploring. And something that really I haven't seen possible on many synths and hasn't been this smooth on a lot of different synthesizers. The last thing I want to show you is how this device can be used as an audio input device. I mean, I can actually route sound through it. And so and this is going to require you to know a little bit about the device and how it works, but it's a great exercise. I think this will work great if you bring like a guitar or bass on stage with you. But I've decided to take the Novation Launchpad app and run it through the synthesizer and see what I can get from that, which I think is actually pretty cool. Now this isn't going to require any other this isn't going to require any other tracks in live, because we're already routing the output of the base station into live. But I am going to make a new clip, and this one is just going to set program to 0 or program to 1. And this way, if I just play this clip, it's always going to jump the device down to the first preset, and I can just rename this using that command R key command, external in. Now, when you start using the external input, all I've done is I've taken a cable that goes stereo out from my iPhone here into the audio input of the base station 2 here. So pretty simple cable. Now, we're going to have to know a couple things to make this work. The first off is the audio output, or the audio in here, is still going through the synthesizer's VCA, or voltage-controlled amplifier. So we'll have to hold the key down to get any sound from this. But normally, when you hold a key down, you're going to hear your oscillators, right? So we're going to have to set this up a little differently to get this to work how we want. Oh, and latches on, that's why it keeps playing, which is actually going to be useful for us. So the first thing we have to do is actually start looking at the mixer section of our base station. And if we're trying to use this for an audio input and not have audio kind of also going, we're going to take our oscillators and turn them all down. And then this last knob in this section can actually be used in 3 different ways. It can be used to control the external input level, a ring mod, or a noise source level. And we're going to put that to the external level and turn that all the way up. All right? And now, I'll be pretty good to go. I will want to work with my envelope because, like I said, everything that goes into the audio in of this device is going through the VCA. So, and we have the envelope control configured to change the VCA. So I'm going to leave sustain all the way up and put attack and decay all the way down. I'm going to keep release all the way down as well. And as you're adjusting your envelope on the base station, you really do have to be careful with the envelope select switch here. Make sure it's actually changing the amp envelope, which it is in this instance. So I'm going to hit play with some stuff on the Launchpad here. So I can see level under here, the drums are playing, and I'll get kind of a little melodic thing going as well. All right, so that's kind of playing there. And now I want to hear it, so I'll just play a note. And there we hear the output of my Launchpad, or I mean my Launchpad app going through this. One of the cool things is it is going through the filters as well. So we can filter this in any way we want. And if you have envelopes and LFOs on your filters, they'll actually filter what you have going through the input here. Now, one thing that's useful is the latch function. So if I play a note, turn on latch, this thing will just keep playing. And I'm free to kind of go nuts with it, right? Distort it and filter it any way I like. I like the acid filter. And we get a different. So now I'm filtering this thing through this. And again, we could use the same reverbs in software now on this as well. So one other thing to be aware of if you're using the audio in is you may have to adjust the level of the audio in, right? Depending if you're putting a microphone in, output of an iPhone, or maybe your guitar or bass, you might have to change the input gain. And that again is one of our kind of key on functions. So I can go to function here, hold that, and when this button right here is input gain, I'll click input gain, and we see that it's at 34 gain. I can play a note, and you hear it's going to make it louder and louder. We're setting the input gain. It's like turning up the gain in your amplifier. So you get that to a point where it's not distorting. And once you're happy with the input gain, you can exit right there, and now you're free to filter it, do whatever you like with it. We can just stop this here, or I can turn off latch, and there we go. So that's how I might go about creating kind of a performance environment. And you can see with all these different aspects on stage, I could easily switch to playing clips. I could play some synth stuff on top of here. I can add in a bit of the app, run it through the filters here. And I could even record these things to audio in real time, record little MIDI ideas, bring them back in. All these things are great. And I love this idea of trying to just build an environment for yourself, right? You're kind of giving yourself just the buttons and knobs and faders that you want to be able to improvise in your way on stage. So hopefully this has helped. I have to admit that I've been teaching Ableton for a long time, and I've used lots of different controllers. And I was hesitant for a long time to get the Launchpad. When it first came out, I don't know why, but I was kind of hesitant. And I've had it for a couple weeks now. I absolutely love it. I think it's really well thought out, a solid build, and this synthesizer sounds fantastic. So really happy to have this chance to share this information with you. Hopefully I'll see you in one of my classes sometimes. Again, this is the kind of thing that I cover in my chats. We're always talking about the latest gear and always kind of looking at the latest Ableton and Logic and Pro Tools techniques. I really have a great time teaching online. I know my peers, the other professors here, do as well. It's a great environment, and we have a wonderful community, and I hope you can join us sometime.